Let's talk about some proper art now, and that's Alison Critchlow, who's based there in Bowness-on-Solway, has been a practicing artist for many years and has had a really interesting piece of work recently involving a bit of a grant from the Arts Council and a trip to New York, and an artist called Hedda Sterne, who she's going to tell us a lot more about, who I think she's become quite obsessed by. I may be putting it too strongly there, but Al, come off mute, and the floor is yours for 20, 25 minutes to take us through some beautiful slides and for you to tell us your story. Over to you.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Can you share my slides for me?
They're on their way.
Oh, well done. So, yeah, you're not overdoing it. I have become quite obsessed, actually. You're right. So, could you bring up the first slide and I'll talk us through? Okay, so is there a way of putting it onto the big screen? Oh, there we go. Brilliant. Okay, so I applied for a DYCP grant last year. So DYCP is a fund that the Arts Council are running. It stands for Developing Your Creative Practice. And I've never written an Arts Council proposal before, so this was a proper learning curve for me. And I'll be honest, a bit scary actually, because you invest a lot of time into writing these things, and you know there's no guarantee of success. So yeah, I jumped in with both feet. Partly because I was encouraged that I'd received an emergency grant from them in the lockdown, and that had sort of opened my eyes to the idea that it's a thing. You can, in fact, apply to the Arts Council. I'd never done it before. I think maybe I was put off by the sheer scale of the forms, and the whole process just seemed, you know, like life was too short. But actually, post-lockdown, I thought, yeah, actually, I really do want to dig into my practice and see what's happening here and what it's all about, you know, and what I can do with it. So I read the info. I was quite aware that I'd never done this before and that lots of people do it all the time. So I did feel my kind of ignorance, I suppose. So I took the trouble to really read carefully their guidelines. I also spoke to some brilliant friends who'd been successful in applications, and they were really, really super helpful. So they were able to help me through the whole kind of what some of the Arts Council language on Grantium actually sort of translates to in normal everyday English. That was invaluable. And I also joined one of those calls that the Arts Council do once in a while, where you can ask them questions and they sort of take you through the process. So I did all of that by way of preparing myself, I suppose. Can we have the next slide, Tom? Thank you. And at the same time, more or less, these images flashed up on my Instagram feed. So they were advertising an exhibition at Victoria Miro in London called Vertical Horizontals. Wow. So I saw, I think the one on the left flashed up, and I just thought, blimey, who's that by? And I did a bit of Googling and I read their press release, and I thought, Hedda Sterne. So it was Hedda Sterne's first exhibition in the UK, and it was in 2020. I'd already missed it by the time I saw these coming up. But I thought, Hedda Sterne, that name is familiar, but I just couldn't picture, you know, what she was all about. So I did a bit of reading. Oh my word. As soon as I got into reading, I just thought, oh, this woman is fascinating. So I ordered the catalogue from that exhibition, seeing as I couldn't go and see it. And on the very first page of the catalogue, I'll read you this quote that they use on a lovely essay about her. And it's Hedda talking at the age of 93, looking back over her work. And she says, at all times, I've been moved, to paraphrase Seamus Heaney, by the music of the way things are. And I just thought, oh gosh, whoever this woman is, I need to find out more. So can you move us on another one, please, Tom? Thank you. So this photo is quite famous, the Erasmus photo. The only woman standing at the back there, that's Hedda Sterne. So I'll give you a brief biography and a sort of quick overview of her life, but I'm not going to go into the ins and outs and the details. So she's an American painter, born in Romania, Bucharest. She born in 1910, lived to the age of 100, and pretty much worked right up until the end, although she lost her eyesight as an elderly lady, but continued to draw after she'd become blind, which is quite extraordinary, and they are beautiful drawings. Anyway, so she narrowly escaped Nazi Europe in 1941 as a young Jewish woman, managed to get a passage to New York, So at the age of sort of 30, 31, she managed, by the skin of her teeth really, to make this extraordinary journey, quite complicated, across Europe to get the boat from Portugal over to New York. So we should point out at the outset, by the time she's on that boat, she's already set off on quite an exciting art career in Europe. So she'd been hanging out with the kind of avant-garde of Romania. As a teenager, for example, she was going to, you know, kind of Dada poetry performances, and she was well up in the kind of all the ideas around surrealism really fascinated her. She was becoming quite well known for sort of surrealist collages and things like that. She'd exhibited quite a bit in Europe, and she was extremely well educated. So, you know, she'd studied philosophy, art history. She'd spent quite significant periods of time in Paris. So she's bringing all of that learning with her to New York. So, you know, when she arrives there, she is already quite a confident, quite, you know, she knows what she's about artistically. So she lands in the US with all of that. She's often regarded as acting like a bit of a bridge artistically between that kind of European tradition and the kind of abstract expressionist painters. So that's who she's photographed with here. So she's in the mix. This is a famous photo of all the, well, not all of them, but most of the abstract expressionists that are famous, that was taken and published in Life magazine 1951. So it was kind of, the context of that is that they'd all just signed a letter, an open letter, which was complaining to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York about their kind of conservative juries. So there she is in the mix with sort of Jackson Pollock and Rothko, Motherwell, you know, people like that. And these are her peers, and some of them are her friends. And she was properly part of that conversation. So it became, as you say, Tom, a bit of an obsession for me. Why was this woman so clearly in the mix of all these people? She has paintings in all the main collections in America, and yet there's no properly big book written about her. Why? You know, how can that be a thing? So anyway, can you move us on to the next one, please? Thank you. So I've put in just a few examples of her work to give you a bit of an overview, but I mean, this is such a brief overview, but there we are. So this is a sort of fairly typical example of her work in the 50s. And you can see why she was considered to be part of that abstract expressionist movement. So she was very inventive with her use of materials and spent a good deal of time, sort of late 40s through the 50s, painting New York and using spray cans, and really getting to grips with the kind of the speed and all the levels and layers of the city were really there in her work. So I think she was the first person to use spray cans. At the time, they were a brand new thing. Move us on to the next one, if you would, Tom. So a couple more examples here. On the left, you've got another one of these New York series, also made in the 50s, currently on display, which is nice to see, in the Met, which really nice to see that the galleries over there are starting to display their female painters as well as their male ones, which is, you know, a bit new. And on the right there, this is, so to give you the context, I suppose, every 10 years or so throughout her long career, she would have really significant shifts in the way she painted. So this is a good example. On the right, that's an installation shot of an exhibition held not that long ago, actually, by von Darren Waxter, who are the gallery that represent her in New York. So they're showing, I don't know if you can see them, those are geometric paintings that she made, a whole body of work like that in the 1980s. So that gives you some idea of the kind of shifts we're talking about, quite large shifts in her approach. There were also periods where she got really into portraiture, periods where she was, you know, really going down quite a surrealist route. So the artwork itself is very, very hard to categorize. The thread that links it is really her thinking, and her writing is part of really what fascinates me about her. It's kind of, she's somehow managed to document her approach via a combination of the paintings and studio notes that she writes. Could you move us on, Tom? Thank you. So anyway, I wrote my proposal, which, as I mentioned, took quite a lot of effort. I think I must have written 3 drafts at least. And my whole idea was to sort of focus on Hedda Sterne, using some of her ideas and processes to kind of explore my own practice. So using her learning as a sort of framework, I suppose, to poke at my own processes and practice. There were several aspects to it. So obviously one part of it was researching Hedda Sterne, which is no mean feat because there aren't too many big books written about her. This one on the left is the most sort of comprehensive catalogue, which came from a retrospective she had years ago and was vastly, it's the most expensive catalogue I've ever bought, because it's out of print, so I had to order it from America. So that's the very first thing I did. When I heard that I'd got the Arts Council funding, I sent off for this extortionate catalogue because frankly, you can't really look into her work properly without reading that. So there were several aspects to my proposal. I was taking a practice-led sort of approach that was apparent from the start. So I would be experimenting with lots of different materials. So materials new to me, like using spray paint, is a thing I've not really done much before, and various new processes as well. So, you know, I experimented a lot with underpainting, a lot with things like masking and collage and printmaking techniques. I went and learnt some printmaking with Vega at her print studio. So just really exploring how those processes might feed back into my own practice and my own thinking. Some were super useful and some weren't, but that's the nature of experimenting, isn't it? So alongside that, I also wanted to try using writing as part of my practice, which is something I've been heading towards for quite a long time. To help me with that, I had 3 mentors that I had helping me through the whole process. So one painter, Sarah Pixton, who's a great painter in London, very much on my page in terms of what her interests are and the way she uses paint. And then Susan Allen, who I often work with at Wordsworth Trust, who has an amazing knowledge of sort of American literature and is very much on my page in the way she thinks. And Christian McEwen, who's an author and works in the USA. So those were my 3 mentors, and they helped enormously, partly for helping me to keep a check on how my progress was going and helping me to sort of reflect on the whole process. So I didn't sort of run off on a tangent too much, I guess. Alongside, could you move us on again, Tom? Thank you. So alongside that, I was trying some of Hedda's processes. So on the left there, you've got my feline assistant, who's not been massively helpful, but automatic drawing is something Hedda did a lot of, alongside meditation as well. And automatic drawing is something I've been trying out as well. Usually more successful when the cat's not helping, to be fair. And on the right there, that's just a snap of the studio wall with some sort of quotes attached to it. And that's become important to have bits of writing and bits of poetry that catch my eye on the studio wall. I don't know, quotes and lines and thoughts seem to be feeding in much more. So another aspect of all of this was I thought I would sort of read along with Hedda Sterne as a way of understanding what she was all about. So I started reading, you know, poets I'd never even come across before. So it's been a massive learning curve, I can't tell you. Anyway, can we move on again, Tom? Thank you. So this is a painting by me. This is one of the first paintings I made as part of this project. And I suppose it's fair to say that using words as a start point for paintings was a significant breakthrough for me. It sounds kind of like a minor thing, but to me it was huge because it signaled the shift from using paint as a sort of way of depicting things to a completely different focus, which is painting as thinking, really. So no longer really trying to depict with the paint, which, you know, is quite a big change for me. So this is titled The First League Out from Land, and it takes its title from a poem by Emily Dickinson. I'll read you the poem, actually, it's not that long. Exultation is the going of an inland soul to sea, past the houses, past the headlands, into deep eternity. Bred as we among the mountains, can the sailor understand the divine intoxication of the first league out from land? So to me, that poem seemed to speak about liminal space, about it put me in mind of the estuary where I live, which, you know, is this weird space that's sometimes water and sometimes land, sometimes solid and sometimes sinky. You know, it's just extraordinary liminal kind of space. You can never quite tell what it's going to be. And I've long been interested by how external environments like that affect your thinking, how they are in your mind, in your headspace. And I suppose that's what I was thinking about with this painting. So technically, there are some quite new techniques in here for me as well. So you can't really see it, but I started the painting by making stencils and spraying kind of big triangles in the midsection there, which is a completely new way to start painting. Also, I was using an amount of Hedda Sterne's colour choices and palettes, playing around a bit more with very subtle colour shifts. Could you move us on again, Tom? Thank you. I'm going to rattle through some of these. Okay, this next one also took its title from a poem. So the title is Song Sparrow Songs Floating Upward. That comes from a poem by Elizabeth Bishop. Again, completely new to me. I've had this massive learning curve of kind of going, oh my word, all these people I never knew existed. But I suppose this is a good example of where it's all going for me, this idea of trying to find a visual form that's something that's for something that's actually invisible, like a song sparrow song. So this painting, although I don't think it necessarily works that well in many ways, it has got this kind of energy that I liked, and it's horrendously clumpy and chunky, but that's kind of part of it. Could you this on again, Tom? Thank you. So it got a bit too chunky, that first one, so I tried a second version of this one, which was a bit like focusing in on a little section of the previous one. I wanted something a bit lighter, a bit less thick, a bit less heavy duty. But you can see maybe that I'm all the time honing this kind of language of paint. Could you move us on again, Tom? Thank you. So on the right there, that's a close-up detail of the first of the Song Sparrow paintings. And perhaps you can see I've really layered up paint, but I've also tried things that are very new to me, like charcoal on canvas, which is completely new to me and delicious. It's just so nice to draw a line on canvas. It's gorgeous with charcoal. But there's been lots of sort of pouring and dribbling and sort of whisking up paint and trying a lot of Hedda's techniques, some of which would involve building hefty paint layers and then cutting right back through with a blade. Needless to say, that's gone horribly wrong a couple of times. But also using a few of kind of de Kooning's techniques, you know, whisking stuff up into the paint and all manner of weirdness going on, really. But fascinating, because you find in that experimenting that you kind of push it further, and I think it helps your thinking to push further as well. To do this kind of experimenting is liberating. And on the left there, another close-up detail of some spray paint. So for me, spray paint is a new thing, and I love it. It's so fast. It's kind of it's gutsy. You know, you can't be you can't sort of prevaricate with spray paint. You've just got to get on with it, and it's so rapid that you kind of, I don't know, you fling yourself into this into this process. Could you move us on again, please? Thank you. This painting is called Green Speed, and it's another from this series of recent work. So you can see I'm using there spray paint, charcoal. There's an underpainting of acrylic that you can't see beneath it. And underpainting is another thing I've been exploring, really. So could you move us on again? Thank you. And alongside these paintings, these little boards are appearing, which are quite small, maybe 30 centimeters, something like that. Whereas those previous paints are quite big. Sorry, I should have told you the size. It's mostly sort of about 150 by a meter, the big ones. So yeah, these little boards have been happening, and I think they're starting to take the place of sketchbooks. Would you move on again, Tom? I've got a few examples here. So you can see these sort of abstract drawings. I do think of them as drawings. They're on board, and sometimes I use paint in the mix, but they are drawings. And they seem to be sort of a distillation of what I'm seeing and thinking about somehow. So they're happening very quickly alongside these bigger paintings, which are going quite slowly. Could you move us to the next one, Tom? Thank you. So this is another big painting. Oh, there we go. It says 150 by 100. And perhaps you can see that this one is mostly ink and spray paint. You move us on again to the next one, Tom. Thank you. This one's a bit bigger, 150 by 120. This one's called Old Sharky. So you can perhaps see that these paintings now are, they've kind of got their own reality happening. They're not about depiction anymore. They're about a flow and a headspace as much as they're about interrogating how your headspace links with the external world, I suppose. So it seems to me interesting that Hedda Sterne spoke 4 languages fluently, and yet the language she chose to really communicate her ideas was paint. And in that, I really get her. She is all about philosophy and all about the idea of what your outer reaches of your consciousness might be. And she uses her paint to explore that. I find that fascinating. And I find the easiest way to approach that is via painting. Could you move us on to the next one, Tom? Thank you. So these are details of those last 2 paintings you've seen. The one on the left there is actually a work in progress shot from the painting we saw that's called Swimming Through Air. And those are ink lines on canvas with very fluid paint. There's been I've done a lot of pouring and very thin paint as underpainting, some of which gets covered up, but I'm quite enjoying that process. And on the right is the very bottom right-hand corner of the painting we just saw. So another aspect of what I've been looking into is transparency with paint. So really trying out different mediums and different ways of glazing to make colour really shine. And I'm also working very much slower on the bigger paintings. That might be why the little boards are really helping me, because they're very quick. Could you move on, Tom? Thank you. So these are back to the little boards, and you can see these are getting more abstract, and they're starting to really sum up an idea quite quickly visually. A bit like maybe they're like the haiku of drawing, I don't know, of painting, whatever. Could we move on again, Tom? Thank you. So here we go. This is happening. There's a kind of mystery in these little boards. I've started sort of clumping them together in the corner of the studio, and I noticed at some point, I think like this, the sun sort of shines on them, and every so often they seem to really be talking to the pictures above and around them. And then I got a bit obsessed by it, and I've started deliberately moving them around and arranging them differently. When I say moving them around, I mean changing their position, but also which way up they go. Again, that's the process that Hedda Sterne did often. She would often specify that paintings should be turned around and that the viewer could choose the orientation, which I think is an interesting thing. I think it's fascinating when you encourage a viewer to step into that space between where they are and where the picture is. Something magic happens in that space, that interactive space. And I think that's happening between these little boards and the pictures above and around them. There's a sort of space where things are happening. Could you move us on again, Tom? Thank you. So there are a couple more of these little boards. We're getting more recent in what I'm showing you. So perhaps you can see that the language here is evolving. It's almost as though they're slightly ahead of my own thinking. They're sort of chatting away on their own. Could you move on again to the next one? Thank you. And there we go. I've got to a point now. This is outrageous, really. I've painted a strip of the floor white. Again, this is something Hedda Sterne used to do. She used to paint her studio floor white. Now I'm a messy painter, and I'm not sure that's practical, but I've painted one strip of it, just where these boards hang out, because I thought that might help to see even more clearly how I could sort of curate this little space that's going on. The jury's out. I'm not sure if I'll continue to paint that bit white or not, but anyway, could you move us on again, Tom? Thank you. So yeah, all the way along from the very beginning, I should have mentioned, I started with Shana Larrabee, who is the director at the Hedda Sterne Foundation in New York. So they keep an archive of all Hedda's papers, letters, sketchbooks, diaries, a certain amount of books from her bookshelves, loads of her paintings and drawings that are not in the public domain, which is why I'm not showing you more in terms of, you know, that stuff. But anyway, from the very beginning, I set up a video call with her. Oh, wow, what a great woman. She was so generous with her knowledge and really, really helpful in pinpointing for me which aspects of the information that I could get at. She put it in perspective for me how little of the archive is actually online to be read and looked at. So yeah, I'd been fishing through the American archives of the Smithsonian Institute, you know, which does have some digitized material of Hedda Sterne's notes, and it also has a few oral history recordings, which are fascinating, but really the tip of the iceberg. And from the very first video call, she invited me to go to New York and to go and spend some time at the foundation looking at what they had. And I thought, well, yeah, you know, that that would be brilliant. But I didn't know quite how I would make that happen, because I hadn't written that into the proposal. At the time when I wrote the proposal, the COVID situation was such that UK residents, you know, people from the UK weren't allowed to go to America. So I didn't write that in because I thought that might be cause for them throwing out the whole proposal, because if I couldn't physically do it, then, you know, that wasn't helpful. So anyway, I held that in my mind and I thought I'd love to do that, but I'm not quite sure how. So I said to her, I'll work on that. We'll see if that works. Anyway, the stars aligned, and somewhere along the line, the COVID rules changed, and eventually it was possible to go to America. And so, although I hadn't written in my budget that there was to be a trip to America, this proposal did kind of enable a trip to New York for me, in as much as I sold a few big paintings along the way. And normally I would have to use that money to, you know, just pay bills. But because of the Arts Council funding, I was able to put that on one side and say, okay, this is the money for going to New York, I'll do it now. So I did. This is how the shot on the left shows the state of the studio when I left. So I kind of, I headed off to New York for a couple of weeks, towards the end of my project, I suppose. I did know it was the only way to really experience what Hedda Sterne had been all about. So off I went. Could you move us on again, Tom? Okay, so
We've got about 3 minutes left, so we might have to.
That's fine. Okay. I'm gonna rattle through these ones. So this is me landing in New York. Rattle through to the next one, Tom. Thank you. So when I got there, I thought, blimey, this is this is extraordinary. I was a little bit jet lagged, and I've never been to the USA. So I wandered through Central Park, which there it is on the left, and I found myself on the other side, quite near East 71st Street, which is where Hedda Sterne used to live. So I started by having a wander up there, said hello to her house, drank some coffee, and took it fairly slowly. Could you move us on again, Tom? Thank you. This is me going to MoMA, which is the first time I'd seen a Hedda Sterne painting in the flesh. So on the right there, the dark picture is her painting hanging there next to Willem de Kooning, and the other piece is David Smith. And it was so fascinating to see the work in the flesh. Absolutely made sense. Could you move us on again, Tom? Thank you. So this is that painting in detail, and you can see a detail again of it on the right. The complexity of the layers of paint is mind-blowing, and to see her in context, hung beside her peers and in New York, totally made sense of it for me. Could you move on again, Tom? So going to the Hedda Sterne Foundation was a thing. I discovered a route which took me subway to Wall Street on the left, and then the New York City ferry system, oh my word, that is a joy, took me under all the bridges and landed me at Brooklyn, which is where the Hedda Sterne Foundation is. So that became my route to the Sterne Foundation. Could you move us on again, Tom? Thank you. And I can't tell you how absolutely inspiring it was being there. So I was able to meet 3 or 4 people that actually knew Hedda Sterne while I was there. A great conversation with one of her big friends, Mary Ann Cause, who is a professor of literature and was a really close friend, and was able to tell me all about, you know, their discussions, what they talked about, what they read, all of that. So great to meet her, great to meet Patty Trimble, who used to be her studio assistant for 10 years. So she was able to tell me lots about the nuts and bolts of the daily studio stuff. Also Veronique, who was Hedda's niece. Well, that was just wonderful. She lives in Paris, but she happened to be there that week. So we had lunch. Shana Larrabee, who is the person at the Hedda Sterne Foundation, who brilliantly introduced me to lots of other people. Could you move us on again, Tom, please? So the building on the right there, that's Van Doren Waxter, which is the gallery in New York that they use for representing Hedda Sterne now. And Shana very kindly set me up with a private view there to talk to them about the work they held and the kind of approach they're taking to selling Hedda's work, which was fascinating and a completely new experience to me. They sent me along to Sotheby's to have a look at work which was on view for an auction as well of hers, all of which was quite mind-blowing, and I'm still mulling that over. Oh, the one on the left is Snow in Central Park, because, you know, that's the thing. Could we move on again, Tom? Thank you. So it's fair to say the New York experience has put things in perspective, given me the larger picture. There's nothing like it. And I think just going around all the galleries there, you know, the Met, MoMA, Whitney, all of that, it puts you in mind of what art's all about, in actual fact, and in context of a war carrying on now. When you put that next to Hedda Sterne's story and you find yourself talking with her niece about what Hedda would have made of this moment in time, you know, some really important and thought-provoking conversations have come out of that. So the last few, Tom, can we just rattle through these last few? So I just thought I'd finish with showing you the state of the studio now. So work in progress, I might say, on the left there. So if you go through the little picture on the easel we'll come to, the ones on the right, can you move us on, Tom? Okay, this is the ones on the right wall there. So this is a series of work I'm making at the moment in response to a set of Hedda Sterne's drawings that I found in this Hedda Sterne Foundation. There are 27 in her series, and I'm just starting on these. So these are my interpretation of a set of drawings she made. So move us on again, if you would, Tom. These are the first 5 anyway. And then could you move us on again? This is the wee picture on the easel that's now drying, sorry. And this is a detail of that one on the left, which is already moving on. So everything is, you know, nothing's static in there. Everything is moving. The last picture, thank you. That's me to say not to forget that you're all invited to come to an open studio the last 2 weekends of September if you want to come and have a look for yourself and have a better chat. Sorry, I rattled through the end very quickly.
That's quite all right. What a presentation. Amazing stuff. I'm not able to look at chat while I'm sharing my screen, and I can see there's lots of stuff in chat there that people are saying, and I suspect they're probably saying, wow, that's amazing, that's really interesting. And do you have a look at the chat comments, Al, when you get your breath back from talking to us?
Okay, yeah, I will.
I'm conscious of time, and I'd like to fit in Claire's talk as well as Maggie's as well. So what I'm going to suggest is, if anybody wants to pick up and ask Al any questions, then we'll just save those to the end of the meeting at 10:30. So Al, if you can stick around with us until 10:30. But if anyone's got any questions that you want to put at Alison, then please hang around until 10:30 and we'll come back to those. And Amy's usefully put Alison's website address in chat as well. And as Claire says, how do I follow that? Fabulous. Well, Claire, you're going to, because you do fabulous things in Penrith as well. But Alison, thank you. What an amazing, I've got 1,000 questions for you, which I might pick up with you over a cup of coffee sometime soon. But thank you for sharing what obviously was a tremendously, may I say, life-changing probably experience for you.
Completely mind-blowing.
Your art has obviously evolved in all sorts of directions as a result of it. And what's fabulous about these calls on a Friday morning is that you've shared that with 25 other people who knows where that may be affecting them as well. So and I can't wait to come and see your studio again formally in the open studios in September, but I suspect I'll be there before then because it's such a wonderful place there in Burnett-on-Solway. And I commend anybody on this call to go and visit Al and her cat in Burnett-on-Solway. Right, thank you so much. Keep your questions until the end if you possibly can. Right, let's go to Penrith and let's go to see what's going on at the Playhouse and with the players who are in their centenary year. And Clare Watson has recently joined them and joined that part of the world, and is helping to get them on the map a little bit more than they have been up until now. So Claire, I'll get your presentation up, and if you want to kick off with your thoughts, going to give you 10 minutes or so.
Yeah, great, thank you very much. Thanks, Tom. Yes, how do I follow that? What a fabulous presentation. So it's slightly different change of gear now. So we're going to be talking about performance and Penrith Players. As Tom said, I am relatively new to the Players. I joined them just at the back end of last year, relatively new to the area, and post pandemic lockdown decided that I wanted to meet new people, get involved in the community, and Penrith Players fit the bill for me. If you'd like to move on, Simon. Sorry, Tom, sorry. So I wanted to start with a question. How many, like a show of hands, how many of you actually knew that Penrith had a permanent 160-seat, fully kitted out theatre and entertainment venue? I'd be interested to see how many of you actually knew that that was that facility was there. Because my suspicion, I actually can't see your hands because I'm just looking at the slides. My suspicion is that not many of you did, and that's part of the issue, really. And one of the things that I'm hoping to change, having picked up. Most of you probably thought Penrith Players, well, that's just a kind of it's just an amateur dramatics group, isn't it? Perhaps we perform in a small hall. And whilst, yes, it's true that we are an amateur dramatics group, we're a community-based theatre group. Penrith Players is run by volunteers only, and we are celebrating our centenary. But Penrith Players and the Playhouse is much more than that. And just referencing back to the centenary, you might have seen the piece on Border News earlier this year and pieces in the local press. So it's a perfect opportunity for us, really, coming out of the pandemic and celebrating our centenary year to really start trying to change people's perceptions and reach a wider audience with the Playhouse. So yes, if you'd like to move on to the next slide. We are on our anniversary. Move on again, please, Tom. We have got a number of productions. We've already, since we opened up after the pandemic, we've had The Hound of the Baskervilles, The Mandrake. We've got Under Milkwood coming up in June, the 8th, 11th of June. We've got Handbagged, which is a performance that should have happened in April, but was postponed because most of the cast came down with COVID. We've got Hobson's Choice and a bunch of amateurs. So you can see we do have a good variety of programme of performances. But we're much more than that. It's much more than theatre, than amateur dramatics. If you'd like to move on to the next slide. The Playhouse is actually a theatre. It's a venue that's actually available for the entire community. We have touring bands, we have plug and play nights, we have tribute acts coming along, we have live comedy, and we're also used by other community groups for performances. I'd like to move on to the next slide, Tom. So this is just an example. You might not need to click. There we go. This is just an example of some of the things that we've got coming up this year. The one I absolutely love, Pete Loaf. I mean, what a great name for a tribute band. That's actually, Pete Loaf is the guy who, I think he made the semi-finals or the final of Britain's Got Talent. But as you can see, we've got a real variety of music on offer. We've got comedians this year, Harry Baker. We were supposed to actually have David Shield, who's a really amazing classical pianist and comedian who does a really unique show. But unfortunately, he broke his hand on arriving in the UK and had to cancel his entire UK tour. But you can see the kind of variety. So we have amateur dramatics, we have music, we have comedy, and we're a resource for the local community to use as a theatre. Like to move on? So what are our priorities kind of in our centenary year post-pandemic? Well, we've got a number of key priorities that we're trying to move on really as a group. Go to the next slide. The first one, as I said, is about changing perceptions of what we are and who we are. You know, do you see the rabbit? Do you see the bird there? But most people think that we are just a small amateur dramatics group. They have no understanding of the facilities that are actually available, and the music program, the comedy program that we put on. So we wanted to change the perceptions and really start promoting the Playhouse as a community resource, as a community theatre, as a community music venue, and as somewhere that people in the area can come to actually enjoy live performance, that you don't necessarily have to go out of the area to enjoy that. You can actually do it in the heart of Eden. If you'd like to move on to the next slide. The other thing that we obviously want to do is we're looking to grow our audience. As you'll all be aware, arts suffered dreadfully during the pandemic, and we have seen audiences drop, and we are looking to not only reconnect with our own audiences, but identify new audiences that would really enjoy coming to the theatre and coming to the Playhouse. So that's a piece of work that I'm working on at the moment with the rest of the committee, actually identifying how we can reach out, how we can engage with a younger audience, how we can engage with the local music scene, how we can engage and take advantage of the fact that we do live in a tourist area, and that people visiting the area do want to have kind of evening entertainment and want to come and see music, want to come and see a theatre. So that's something that we're looking to do and really get that going this year. We also need more volunteers. Nobody's employed by Penrith Players. We are completely run by volunteers. That's everything from not only the actual performances themselves, but the bar, managing the maintenance, everything is done by volunteers. So again, numbers have dropped over the last couple of years because of the pandemic. So we're trying to reach out and get more people interested in getting involved and giving their time. It's very rewarding. I certainly found that's in the last 6 months. So we're looking for people who want to get involved both on stage, behind the scenes. We're looking for new directors. So for example, we've got most of the 2023 theatre programme sorted, but we are still short of a performance towards the end of the year, and looking for new directors who might want to come on and run a production with us. We're also looking to boost our youth group numbers. We've got a youth group that meets every Thursday night during term time, and puts on a couple of performances a year. Numbers dwindled again because of the pandemic, so we're really trying to inject some life into that group and recruit enough new young members to put on a pantomime in December this year. So we're looking for people to spread the word and get more involved. And of course, financially, it's not just about kind of ticket sales and bar sales. We do occasionally have sponsors who come on board, and local businesses who support the theatre. They might sponsor a production. So we're also looking to extend our reach in terms of local businesses who might want to actually sponsor and get involved. If you'd like to move on a couple of slides. Again and again. That's it. That's it. I was talking away and didn't realise that the slides hadn't moved on. So the other big thing, I suppose the one big thing is the development of the theatre. So we have we're calling it the project, very imaginative. So our big project is how we develop the theatre. We are currently going through a process of applying for grants, looking for funding, because there's an awful lot that we can do with the theatre. It needs some investment. We're looking to improve the bar area. We're looking to improve some of the facilities. And we really want to install retractable seating, because at the moment the 160 seats they're fixed seating, and then we feel that if we had retractable seating, we'd be able to have more flexibility in terms of how the venue is used. And we want to reach out to the local community. We're going through a consultation period with the local community to identify how it could be used, what else could it be used for, how would we need to develop the theatre in order to meet those needs? Because we'd like the theatre, we think there's an opportunity for the theatre to become a real hub for the community, and certainly be used more. It's probably used a fraction of the time that it could be. There's a great opportunity for it to really become kind of like a performance hub for the local community. So we are reaching out at the moment, and we have had some great input from community groups already. So watch this space, and if anybody has any thoughts in terms of, or any input, if you'd like to kind of give us some input into what you think the local area needs and how the theatre could fill that gap, we'd really welcome that input. Would you like to move on, please, Tom? So that's kind of the end, really, of what I wanted to talk about. And I'm happy to answer any questions at the end, as Tom said, or you can get in contact with us through the website and our social media. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Claire. That's really useful for people to know, and perhaps one or two perceptions changed about what the Playhouse is and what the Players are about as well. And Amy, again, has usefully put in a website there for the Players website there too. So thank you very much indeed. And Claire can be contacted through that website, I'm sure, as well. Lovely stuff. And or get down to the Playhouse in Penrith if you can for all those things coming up. Pete's Loaf, what a great, I love the way tribute bands come up with their dodgy names of, you know, they can't be the real thing, so what do they call themselves? Pete Loaf is pretty good. Right, thank you very much. Let's finally, this morning, in the last 5 minutes or so, hear from Maggi Toner-Edgar, who is familiar to these meetings from time to time. She's part of Evan and also the Western branch of Evan, and there's a project that they are involved in Keswick, in the old pencil factory, which has been refurbished. I'm going to show you a couple of pictures of that. So Maggie, tell us all about factory and what's going on in August. Over to you. Do you want to come off mute, Maggie?
Sorry, rookie mistake. It's been a fabulously inspirational morning, by the way. Thank you for both speakers. And I think really this might tie in, Alison might be very interested in hearing about this. What I'm going to do while you're getting my pictures ready is, I think I've just got a link there. I'm just putting the link in the chat where people can find what I'm going to talk about, because I'm going to keep it really short, Tom, and try to move on nice and quickly. Okay, so I'm a co-director of Evan and a founder of the West branch of Evan, and I won't sort of say much about me. Quite a lot of you probably have already met me anyway, but I have just very recently been given, well, not given, we've hired a space with a little bit of funding that we had left over from something else we were doing. We have hired a space in the new refurbished Home of the Cumberland Pencil. Can you move on, please, Tom? You probably have driven past it. I just thought it's useful to remind yourself just about it, because I've chopped the ends off the building, but in this little quick photo shot, it's massive. And it is actually, I think it's going to be the biggest venue for the arts in Cumbria, because we don't have anything like this. And before it was renovated, it was just not the sort of place where anything could happen. But as soon as I heard about the renovation through the pandemic period, I went to have a look, and I've just got in time to do it this year for August. It's August the 11th to the 14th, and we're calling it Factory, basically because this is the very first basic technology of art, the pencil, which was made there in this factory. And also we're thinking of the concept of the axe factory of the Lake District and all the things that were created. And so we're using it in a very broad sense to cover the arts in general. So what we've decided to do is call it Factory. It's a festival of creative arts. The foyer, in the centre there, the blue section is the foyer. It is so enormous that the open well of the foyer would host enormous canvases, and we will have a big film projected in there as well. So anybody who joins us from the 11th to the 14th at the Festival of Creative Arts will be able to hang enormous big canvases and put big sculptures up and things like that, which will be outside of the little stand that they purchase or hire for their time there in the weekend. So for a full weekend, it will be £250. So I need to say that to you, because I think it's important that before you click on the application form that you have a little bit of knowledge about what you might be investing in, which is still very cheap. We're going to set up on the Thursday. We've got music. So the bands and the buskers that we have with us all weekend will be happening outside. We have big canopies outside for people to have little drinks and to take in a bit of the ambience. And we've also got, in the early evening, we have bands playing, and we still would like more bands to get on board. Because Evan is a very diverse range of artistic types, from writers right through, poetry, music writing, music singing, right through the rest of the visual arts and designer makers. But we really want this to be an arts festival that is really good quality. So it's not just a craft fair as such. We've got a whole load of screens hired, ready. So there will be lots of space to hang large pieces, such as those beautiful canvases that we're looking at earlier. So go to the next slide, please, Tom. Just to show you, because I don't know whether you realise how it looks so much nicer inside now. It's extremely well lit. I mean, it's just breeze block, but it's all painted white. And the renovation they've done so far is so wonderful. It's going to be a phenomenal space. So we're just hoping to show visitors to Cumbria that we're not just about the mountains, although we love them, and we often paint them, and so do our artists, but we're also about contemporary arts and enterprising designers who want to show that we can produce art on a standard that matches any other art fairs across the country. But this is a big risk for me. It's a bit of a gamble. We haven't got a lot of money. We haven't got a lot of time. The call out finishes on the 27th of May. So if you're really keen, please get in touch, and the link is in the chat to go to. So I'm going to leave it there, Tom. I won't take up any more time because I know people probably want to ask Alison questions, but I really feel like this is a bit of a gamble, and I've been a bit brave. And I'm just shooting in on the end of the Keswick Ministries Lakes Convention of, the religious convention in Keswick. So all of their stuff will still be there in place, like the canopies. And this is their very first event with a brand new, fully refurbished, iconic building.
Great stuff, Maggie. What a great looking space that is. Sort of, vaguely reminds me of Tate Modern when it first opened, and it's just kind of, big, bland, big spaces. And it's kind of quite a nice architecturally. It's sort of like an Art Deco type building, isn't it? The factory.
Yeah, it's absolutely fab.
So you need as much publicity as you can get, I would have thought, to make that work. And obviously today's session, what you've just said the last 5 minutes, is a shout out to people to say, if you're interested in exhibiting there, get in touch with Maggie. The closing date is in about 12 days or something, isn't it?
Yeah,
so
it's quite close.
Get a move on, and further conversations to have with Maggie, who's well done, Evan, for organising that, and good luck with that. And it's always great to see a new initiative take place in this part of the world. As you say, we're not just about mountains and lakes, we're about lots of other things as well as mountains and lakes.
Yeah. And anybody who comes as an artist will get free access to all the music all weekend as well. So
great. So Maggie, just make sure your contacts are in the in chat once more.
Yeah. Okay.
It's 10:30. I'm just going to draw your attention before I then call a close to the meeting. But if you want to stick around to talk to Alison, then do stick around. Just for your diary, June the 24th is a Friday, and we're going to spend a little bit of time, probably an hour and a half as opposed to an hour at that meeting, looking at a particular aspect of the Arts Council strategy, Let's Create, which, as we probably know, there's 4 investment principles with Arts Council strategy, the new one for the next 10 years: ambition and quality, dynamism, environmental responsibility, and inclusivity and relevance. And the last 2 quarterly meetings, we've looked at environmental responsibility and we've looked at ambition and quality. And we're just going to spend a little bit of time looking at inclusivity and relevance, which of course is about ensuring that the creative and cultural sector better reflects and serves all communities across England, a commitment to achieving greater fairness, access and opportunity. And this is partly because on the 5th of July at the University of Cumbria in Carlisle, PRISM are leading a symposium looking at this subject, and we thought we could just preview that with a couple of speakers looking at what that subject matter actually is about. So just on the 24th of June, which is a Friday, so about kind of 4 Fridays down the line, if you can join us for that, it'll probably be an hour and a half meeting, so 9:30 through to 11, and a really interesting one to explore. And if you're about Arts Council applications, there are certain things that you need to do to show them that you are thinking their way of doing things. And that's why we're patterning these quarterly meetings about those principles. So we're looking at the third principle there about diversity and inclusion. So more about that in due course. But for the moment, thank you ever so much, everybody, for joining us this morning. Alison, Claire and Maggie, thank you for your presentations. And we'll be back at the same place, same time next week. And we've got Daniel Tyler McTeague from Barrowful talking to us about the current state of play with that project next week. That, of course, was an Arts Council Creative People and Places organisation, formerly known as Barrow Culture, now rebranded as Barrowful. And we're going to explore what they're doing with that at the moment. So that's the plan for next Friday. So stick around if you want to talk to Alison. Otherwise, see you again soon.